Today, we will talk about XLM and how its involvement in the Ukraine relief transactions might actually look like what FedNow and the CBDC or UBI could look like here or over in Ukraine and other countries as well. And we'll tie in a little bit of how SBF and FTX kind of have a involvement here as well regarding Ukraine, and just a reminder not to really trust anyone out there. So today, XLM is at about 12 cents. Not really too much interesting news happening anywhere, especially in altcoins. I think that we'll have an opportunity to pick up some high quality assets at a price reduction if Bitcoin can't hold where it is now, and it probably won't. So here's the XLM chart. We had the big pump when the SEC lawsuit against XRP confirmed that XRP is in fact not a security after all, just like everyone knew. Not only did XRP pump, but XLM and XDC pumped at exactly the same time by pretty much the same percentages as well. Well, I take that back. I think XRP and XLM were just about the same, with XDC actually having a lot higher pump off of that, and it is up still as well. We have a high RSI, which is generally a good sign that people are out there picking this up. You have your MACD beginning to trend back upwards, but your Dow Jones is heading down and your DXY is heading up again, which historically don't really help the price of crypto right now, at least. And let's check out the market cap, which actually kind of has a reverse trend. As the DXY has been increasing, we really haven't seen too terribly much of a trend. I mean, this is basically following everything else. It's not being disproportionately affected. So, well, yeah, I take that back. It does have a trend that I would expect. It was lower here, which was at your higher peaks, and then we've increased again. So that's kind of a copy of everything else. But here is the meat of what I wanted to talk about. Again, this is coming from XX1133122111. There's some numerology in there, but I don't really pay attention to a lot of that stuff. Well, I take it back. I do, but I don't really understand it, and it's still too far-fetched for me at this point. But I do know that it's probably one of the ways that the elites actually control everything and communicate amongst themselves as well. And I actually have an example of that I will probably show at one point. So essentially, when the Ukrainian war with Russia was happening, XLM was used to toss over some USDC through the XLM network, and they were handing it out for quote-unquote aid for war-torn Ukrainians. And if you think about it, this looks a lot like what the potential for FedNow and CBDCs over here is. Now look, FedNow is not a CBDC platform right now. They haven't come out and announced that because it would get a good amount of public resistance. Not that that would actually impact anything, but they haven't come out and said that. But this is pretty much how a CBDC or UBI would work as well. And I have previous videos about the I guess pluses and minuses of a CBDC and how it would work. Much more drawbacks than advantages, in my humble opinion. But this same funneling framework would very well be how it would work over here, especially for a universal basic income, where your programmable money, which is a CBDC, could expire after a certain amount of time. It could only be used for certain things. You could transact pretty much instantly with it, depending on what network it operates on. The taxes would be much easier to calculate and confirm as well, which means that the IRS will have even more eyes into your income and your expenses as well, which the expenses part is what they don't really have as much of a handle on at this point in time. But as we saw with the Coco thing happening a couple of years ago now, wink wink, the funds that the US government handed out to pretty much everyone, that could be just sent directly through a CBDC and be an incentive to migrate your finances over to a CBDC platform, as in you can't receive this unless you accept using our CBDCs now, which unfortunately I think will work for the vast majority of the population. So I don't really think that's necessarily groundbreaking. I have talked about a lot of this, but I thought that this comparison was very interesting. And if you look into what Ukraine is actually working on, I found some articles about the crypto related assistance, and I will include these links in the description below as well. But it talks about cash donations being very difficult in wartime situations and geographies, because you can't really necessarily easily just carry a lot of cash into a part of the world where there's a lot of armed conflict happening. So that's the nonprofit fund by the XLM owning organization, that was who was actually operating here, and it went through the United Nations as well, which I'm not ever a proponent of, but they got this accomplished in less than 10 months, and it explains how it operates here. They used it to send USDC, which is essentially cash, and they could cash it out on their end in their banks, however that would work amongst themselves, which also leads to the increased opportunity to take some kickbacks and for money laundering, which I will touch on briefly as well, just because I can't help putting on my tin foil hat. So it did work. They were able to transfer a lot of money, and that money was able to be utilized by who and for what purposes. Well, we don't really always know, which leads me to say that I think this was one about how this was about another article. I thought this was another one explaining that Ukraine was actually working on a CBDC off of XLM, and they had operated a pilot program with their either the central bank or one of the major banks over there. So I apologize for not having that right link, but yeah, it's not really anything new or extraordinary. Every country out there is probably experimenting with it to some extent right now, and it all looks essentially the exact same. There's a lot of them who are partnered up with XRP. There's at least one, obviously, with XLM as well, and XLM is a direct variant of XRP, and it's essentially the exact same thing. So it has really fast transaction times and low fees, which are the only things that make sense for a CBDC kind of a platform. So let's look at these other articles I found, which I think were really interesting. So I found this one first, which is the follow-up on an article about Ukraine and FTX. So this just expanded on it a little bit more, but the original article, which is from today. Okay, wow, I didn't. No, it is from the last year, around when all of the FTX thing was coming apart. So if you scroll down, the most interesting part of things is here. So one, tens of billions of USD have been sent to Ukraine. The money was quote unquote laundered through FTX. The laundered money, now in the form of FTX cryptocurrency, was funneled back to the D party and the family of the president at this point. All of that money is now gone, and FTX is just out of business for all intents and purposes at this point in time. FTX gave at least $40 million to the D party in advance of the 2022 midterms. FTX funded congressional campaigns for congressional members on the oversight committee for the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which is heavily involved in regulating the crypto industry. FTX's ex-CEO, SBF, aggressively lobbied them. FTX was, and I guess is, currently under investigation by the CFTC and the SEC. There's been some really sadly disappointing but not unexpected results from that, but there is still things ongoing there. The investigation was opened up after SBF allegedly moved $10 billion in client assets at FTX to his trading firm Alameda, which they were the ones who were basically manipulating Solana, which is where they were able to get a lot of their capital to be able to do everything else that they were doing. A liquidity crisis at FTX. It was bankrupt. FTX is directly involved with and related to Ukraine. In March, the Washington Post reported that Ukraine was dealing in cryptocurrency, which we just explained. The Ukrainian government collected more than 42 mil in crypto donations. Approximately a week after Ukraine gathered the donations, FTX engaged with Ukraine. SBF formulated a cryptocurrency donation project, and SBF announced that FTX would help support Ukraine. The Ukrainian government then received over $60 million. SBF cited humanitarian aid and help as his incentive there. SBF indicated that crypto exchanges should enforce sanctions announced by whoever government that they act under. SBF was the number 2 donor to the D party, right behind this guy whose name I won't say. The money laundering circle was the D party votes to send funds to Ukraine. Ukraine invests in FTX. FTX cryptocurrency was funneled back to the same D party. So if you look at this at more traditional news websites on the MSN, there's all kinds of fact-checking articles out there. There's articles that have it in the headline that call it misinformation. And anytime that I see that, I think the exact opposite. So I just thought that that was a really interesting way to tie in what I found here, which is what I found so interesting, and especially how it's related to things that I have already talked about, and other more conspiratorial things that I don't talk about a whole lot on here at this point in time. So I hope that was interesting. I still think that XLM is a great buy. It is a great asset. It seems to be pegged in a way to XRP. So I keep tossing a little in it here and there. I will talk to y'all next time.